Okay, well, I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's Dean Speaker Series. I'm Michael Katz. I'm the director of the Institute for Business Innovation here at Haas. As you'll see, my job is to dress like this and read prepared remarks, so I'll make our speaker look even cooler than he already is. Better. As probably most of you know, I'm going to turn this off in 1 second. I do not want to hear myself. I've already read the remarks 5 or 6 times. Okay. As you know, the Dean Speaker Series brings together distinguished leaders from business and other organizations to come to Haas to share their expertise and their experience with our community. And we've had the privilege of having a great lineup this year already, and tonight's speaker certainly is no exception. Yves Behar is one of the most important industrial designers of our time. At Haas, we've long valued design. You may have heard of it's a fad that some of the other business schools have picked up recently, but it's something that we've been very interested in for a long time. And indeed, the reason I have the privilege of doing the introduction tonight is because the Institute for Business Innovation houses a collection of centers that are interested in innovation, design, entrepreneurship, and strategy. And one of our center directors, Sarah Beckman, has been a champion of teaching design at Haas for decades. I know she's not that old, but somehow she's done it anyway. And interesting, what really got Haas started were the entrepreneurial efforts of one of our MBA candidates. In 1993, Amy Chen, who had a background in fashion design, questioned why design didn't show up more in the MBA curriculum. And in that great professorial tradition, when her professors were challenged, they just turned around and challenged her, and they said, well, then why don't you put together a class of your own? And she did. And today that course is still with us. It's known as Design, a Strategic Management Issue. And since then, there's been a lot more. Okay. They've expanded the offerings of design to have several electives. In fact, one of the most popular courses at Haas is the design elective that was developed by Sarah Beckman and Alice Agagino. It's called Managing the New Product Development Process. It brings together MBAs and engineering students to develop ideas into prototypes. And following in Amy's footsteps, other MBAs have created the Design and Innovation Strategy Club. And lastly, in the fall of last year, the school introduced its first core course based on design thinking principles, problem finding, problem solving. Again, Sarah Beckman was there as the inaugural instructor. At Haas, we're very proud that Business Week named us one of the world's top design schools. We're also very proud that our students have been putting their Haas educations to good use. For example, some of the teams in the new product development course have successfully taken their products to market, including Revolution Foods and Pact Apparel. And that's where Yves comes in. For those of you who don't already know this story, Pact Apparel is an underwear company launched by Haas alumni Jeff Denby and Jason Kibbe. Notably, its products raise awareness and funds for various social causes. Yves was a judge in the new product development class projects. He was so impressed by their project that he approached them about a design partnership. And I have to say we're very pleased to have both Jeff and Jason joining us here tonight. And you want to stand up? And you can tell they're socially responsible. They both have beards. Moreover, beyond that, their success demonstrates the power of being able to design new business models and innovative products, skills that are key components of Haas's emphasis on developing leaders who know how to put fresh ideas to work anywhere and everywhere in business. And now, to introduce Yves, I'd like to bring up Ted Janis. Already brought him up. Amazing how that works. Okay. Ted is a Berkeley undergraduate degree in political science and an MBA from Haas, his class of '94. He's contributed to Haas in numerous ways over the years. He's been instrumental in bringing several outstanding speakers to Haas, including tonight's speaker. He serves as a member of the Dean's Advisory Circle. And thanks to a 2007 gift, Haas launched 3 Silicon Valley Social Venture Fund fellowships through the Center for Nonprofit and Public Leadership. Ted is an excellent example of a Haas alumnus who embodies our distinctive culture and is making a measurable difference in the future of our school. We truly appreciate Ted's continued friendship and support of our school. I just would like to say thank you, Ted. Also, on a more personal note, Ted is proof that you can take a course from me and still lead a happy and productive life. I know you don't believe that.
Seriously, one of the best instructors here when I was here, and I'm sure he still is.
Don't be so sure. In any event, please welcome me please join me in welcoming Ted Janis back to Haas.
Thank you, Michael. It's always good to come back to Berkeley. We are very fortunate to have Yves Behar here tonight. He is a very popular speaker these days. 2 weeks ago, he spoke at the Clinton Global Initiative, and he's a regular speaker at the TED Conference. Yves is the founder of fuseproject, an award-winning design and branding firm here in San Francisco. Design from the inside out is the very essence of a lot of his work. Sure, a product needs to look good, but more than that, maybe it needs to have a functional purpose, and it also needs to have a functional purpose, and also if you can get an emotional connection to your consumer, that is great. Examples of some of his more commercial products include the Jawbone headset. Can I see a show of hands? How many people have one of these things? There we go. That's pretty decent market penetration. We could use a little bit more. Another example of a commercial product is the Leaf Light by Herman Miller, which has been revolutionary in technology and LED. Beyond this stuff, I think a hallmark of many of Yves' products is not only do they look good, but they actually do good. Yves is a dedicated philanthropist. He designed the EXO laptop for the One Laptop Per Child program, which has brought education and technology to the world's poorest school children. He has also partnered with the Mexican government to come up with a program to give free eyeglasses to children in that country. At Berkeley, we love people who are entrepreneurial, we love people who are philanthropic, and we love people who are independent thinkers. Yves embodies all these qualities. Please join me in welcoming Yves Behar.
Thank you, Ted. You're a good friend. He's really good with all kinds of speeches, including introductions. But now I'm going to talk, and I'm going to do something that every designer always does. I'm going to be tweaking my presentation and the resolution so we get a bigger display on the screen. Let's see if that works. Yeah, that's what we do as designers. We kind of keep tweaking until it's okay. So thank you for having me back. As most of my points have been taken by the previous speakers, I was here not that long ago. I met Jason and Jeff, and we're on this incredible story, the packed underwear story. And initially it got me a lot of jokes to be working on underwear. But now I think everybody's used to it, and it's pretty average, normal thing. I don't know if you guys saw this morning, there was a very interesting article on the Fast Company website called "Designers Are the New Drivers of American Entrepreneurialism." A really nice article by a gentleman called Bruce Nussbaum, who kind of made the whole notion of innovation very trendy, and then he retracted from that. And now is speaking on behalf of design rather than just innovation. But in that article, nicely sort of pointed out that fuseproject has been doing an entrepreneurial type of design for the last 10 years. But I think what's even more exciting to me is that, and I speak to sort of MBA students more and more often, is that they get it. Hopefully you guys get it, because as we were talking earlier with one of the clubs here, what's the name of the club again? DISC, the DISC Club. Apparently there's still a lot of resistance about how design gets integrated into business, and how business integrates design, as well as how design integrates business in everything that we do. So I'm gonna try to walk you through, I think, what the ROI is on design, and also maybe some of the ways that we've been approaching this kind of work. So the first thing I would say is that we get a lot of questions about how it is that we do our work. How do we create teams that function? How do we engage with startups? How do we become a part of those companies that we work with on an ongoing basis? How do we extend the work of? It sounds like there's some vibration, right? When I talk a little bit, no crackling. Okay. How do we extend the work of design into areas such as graphics and packaging and communications and even advertising? I have a lot of people have a lot of questions about simply how do we do what we do, and how does it come out different from the way my profession is practiced. And so I thought what I would do here is sort of share a method of how it is that we work. And actually, it's not so much a method; it's more of a set of principles, because a method would be too easy, I think. So I have seven things that I think are important to do my work, but I also think to think about how you would engage and build a business that would be design-centric. The first one is to start with questions and not start with answers. Pretty much if you get any kind of brief from, your typical brief from a marketing, you would get from marketing or someone else, pretty much has all the answers contained in the brief already. So we like actually briefs that have 1 or 2 questions in them, and that's it. And the best briefs really are the ones that just open doors. The first one I'm going to show you is a brief that came from Puma. They said, look, we have these shoe boxes. They work great. We've been using them. We've been using this logistics system, distribution system for 20 years. They look fantastic. Our brand is brightly visible in all of the retail environments. There's no reason for us to change it, unless you can do something great. So the question is, what could you do with a shoebox that's going to be different? And so, one of the things that we did is I had no idea. I'm like, this thing is pretty much perfect. It's made out of a little bit of cardboard. It's, it goes in all of the challenging places that products have to go. You have to make 80 million of these a year to ship shoes from one place to the other. I wasn't sure whether we could do anything. But one of the things that we did is we went in China, we went to Brazil, we went in Germany, and we started just simply looking at what it took to make these boxes, how much energy, how much materials were being used. It's actually mesmerizing to watch at this over and over and over. We also went into distribution centers, some of these in Germany, very, very high-tech places where essentially a robot can go into this maze and sort of pick a specific shoe model, a specific delivery, handpick it out of this entire environment. And that is mesmerizing too. So if you're not hypnotized by these 2 last slides, then you start thinking about, and this was a process, a 2 to 3 year, actually more of a 3-year-long process of sort of really looking at the entire question. How it is that these things are made, how it is that they're shipped, how long do each of these shoe boxes spend on a boat going from a place to another. And what you realize is, okay, if we were going to go back to the CEO in this case of Puma and show a different approach, it had to be really significant. It had to do something major. And after a lot of origami work in the case of our design team, after looking at a lot of ways things come together and fold together and are held in place, we discovered that the best approach would be to actually do a combination of 2 materials, a very, very primitive cardboard, piece of cardboard that is die cut and the most recyclable cardboard and the thinnest possible cardboard that would not be structural. So if you just use that cardboard, it wouldn't sort of fulfill the criteria of being shipped from point A to point B. And then this recycled PET bag, which becomes the thing that keeps it together, the thing that holds it together through shipping. By combining these two materials, we were able to deliver more and not less at every level, every criteria, whether it's the shipping and the logistics part, but as well as to the consumer. So whenever we do sustainability projects or pretty much any kind of project, we always tell ourselves we can't ask the consumer to make a vow of poverty just because the consumer wants to do good, or just because we think the consumer wants to do good. We actually have to give them more than what they expect. So this shoebox is made out of 65% less materials and uses about 60% less energy to be produced. And yet, it delivers more in the sense that when the consumer takes it home, it becomes a reusable bag. We built a whole sort of participation story around it. You don't have to sort of carry your shoes or your purchases in a big vinyl plastic bag. That's an additional, both a saving, but an additional way for the consumer to feel like now they're having a different experience. This is the way the whole program is promoted in store. But think about the sort of mind shift here. It's like you don't sell shoeboxes. Shoeboxes are just what makes the delivery of your product look good. But if you can get the consumer to participate in this effort, to feel that Puma as a company is doing better on every level, you've actually, in the day and age that we live, you've achieved more with this shoebox than you have if a famous designer had designed a short-lived kind of product line for them. And so there is this whole community now online where about 50% of the shoes that Puma ships are now coming in the clever little bag, as it's called. There's a whole sort of community, a whole way that people show what it is that they're doing with it. At the end of its useful life, it is recyclable since it is a recycled PET material. And then we started to apply the same ideas, the same principles to a lot of the other items that need to be packaged. Unfortunately, coming out of Cambodia or China, every single T-shirt has to be packaged in a piece of plastic. I mean, that is really you can see it okay here, but this is a full-size T-shirt in a piece of plastic. I mean, that is an incredible burden at every stage, whether it's the store that has to deal with they basically create a little bowl with the first one, and then they create bowls of plastic that are about this size that they can roll around within the store when they get a new shipment. And of course, that material isn't recycled, and etc. So we struggled with this because this is by law. This is something that we can't change. We struggled quite a bit until one of our designers had the genius idea to say, hey, let's fold the T-shirt one more time. That's all that was done here. So it's half the bag I used to be. We were also able to switch the material to a biodegradable type material. So these two principles are really critical, whether you're trying to create a sustainable business or solve a sustainable product, or simply reinvent an existing business. This is an important one for me because, I think in the fast-changing world that we live in, there's really very few existing paradigms that we can rely on. If you want to create anything of value today, you really need to sort of challenge the status quo. And so creating your own theories of what could work, of what could make a different consumer experience, of what consumers actually want, even though they may not be getting it today, is really important, really critical for us. So again, whether it's an experience or a product, the only way to prove an idea and to prove that it has any kind of merit is often to go out there and prototype it. So, wow, that's ominous sound. So one of this is another project, and we talked about Herman Miller in the discussion we had previously with disk. But one of the theories, for example, that we would put out on a product, goes something like this: can the same principles used to suspend a bridge be applied to a chair? This was in response to a question that Herman Miller gave us, which is, can you build a chair that is of the same ergonomic quality, of the same design excellence, that follows our design for the environment principles, that espouses the excellence of our business, but can you build one that is going to cost a lot less to the consumer? That is a major question, especially when you're Herman Miller and the best chair in the world is the Aeron chair, and it costs between $700 and $1,200 to make. I mean, to buy. So, you know, some of that was essentially looking at new structures and saying, in order to create a chair that's going to be less cost but have all those same qualities, we're going to have to take a radical shift in the way that it's built, in the materials that it uses, and in its entire structure. And so the theory, and I'm going to show you parts of the way this came about. The first set of sketches and drawings that were created were not about aesthetics. They were really about structure, about exploring. And as you can see, a lot of this, by the way, is done by hand. People don't. They think everything's done on the computer, but just in case you didn't know. And this is just probably I'm showing you here 3% or 2% of what was created, what was produced as far as drawings, engineering, CAD, handmade prototypes, machine prototypes, etc. It's probably 3% of what was created in order to build this chair. But the theory became that if we use a different building principle, we could actually use less materials. And if we use less materials because of that building principle, we would have less cost, because you pay for every pound, every ounce, every of plastic that is in your product, or any material, not just plastic. And then the theory continued that if we did that, we would have a lower carbon footprint for the product, and hence reach the environmental criteria that we wanted in the project. So, by the way, this is not a theory that is embraced by business today. When they want to make something cheap, they make cheap crap. Let's be very clear about that. I've never had a client that's come to me and said, look, this is on the lower end of our product line, or the lower end of our offering, but we're going to spend more money, and we're going to spend more money designing it, more investments, more long-term investments, more capital investments into the way it's built, in order to come out at the end with something actually that's going to work. Usually you hear exactly the reverse. It's like, we have no money, we have to do it quick, and it can't cost us anything, and in the end, you know, we're ready to compromise on all of the 21st century principles, such as quality and environmental stewardship. So this is the kind of company that you want to work with, somebody like Herman Miller, who is ready to go for it. And we had to build about 30 to 35 prototypes, a lot of them built by hand. This is, you can really see the emergence of the bridge with a vertical span, and then a vertical tower and a horizontal span. What we discovered is, by curving the span where you would typically have cars going over the bridge, this one, we were then distorting these strands that we built onto the chair, and that distortion, we could calibrate it to become the perfect ergonomic shape, perfect ergonomic support. And every single one of these prototypes was uglier than the next. But I can promise you that every single time these were made the team incredibly happy and excited, because every single one of these represents a breakthrough in discovering what this next generation chair was going to be. And so the notion of eco-dematerialization came in, and you fail a lot, so you have to be ready for that. And so this notion of eco-dematerialization became the theory. We actually put a patent around the principle, around the idea, around every single part that we ended up designing here. So we took every single part and started to look at it from a reducing of, this is the handle that goes on the side of the chair. But essentially every part has been hollowed out, literally, and became a challenge. Now, anybody who makes such a complex product cheaply is going to just go to different suppliers and assemble different parts together. But that means that they're structurally not performing with each other. So you actually duplicate a lot of that. So we had to really design it from the ground up, with every single part in this way. Then we did the same for every component of the chair, which is hollowed out, structurally rethought, to arrive to this product line called Sail. So far it's a very, very successful launch, and the chair is available at retail for $400, which is less than half than a lot of the competitors and the current product line. And then what you need is 360-degree design, not 360%. I don't know what that is. But for projects who have sort of the quality and the refinement that you want, you really need to be involved in them all the way through. And that means, whether it's being in China when this giant injection room, you can step into this thing, it's pretty incredible, sort of presses your first parts, and you're there to sort of tweak and refine every part of a product or every part of an experience. But this continues in the way that you communicate, in the way that you build the assets that will tell the story of this project. And this is something that we do at Fuse Project now, which is we really extend ourselves into the areas, into all kinds of areas that traditionally industrial designers were not in. The reason for that is, I believe that whether it's the iconography, how you will see something, how you will recognize something at first glance, or whether it's the way something is launched and exhibited, whether it's a big or small exhibit, whether it's the advertising of the product. At every stage, there is a need to communicate the same idea, and this is what we call 360-degree design, which we have practiced extensively. But the problem with 360-degree design is that you're essentially telling your clients, your partners, well, we're going to work with you for a long time, forever. And they're like, well, I don't know if I can afford you for that long. So the reinvention of the business model is something that we had to do at Fuse Project. And we started on this path about 8 years ago or so. And the reason was we wanted to be creative at every level. We can be as creative as we want on the design and communication side, and still not truly communicate the value of what we do or derive the right kind of value for what we do. And the reinvention of the business model came about because I felt like the business of design could probably be handled by a high school student in your company, to be honest. The way design businesses work is essentially, well, how many hours is it going to take you? Ask the client, and the designers say, well, is it going to take us this many hours? And the only way you actually make money as a consultant is if you finish the job faster than you had originally predicted, which doesn't mean the best outcome for the client. So what we started to think about is how do we stay involved so long, and how do we get the kind of control and the kind of impact in the work that we do, so we can both dictate or be a part of dictating the outcomes and deriving value from those outcomes. So we developed this notion of partnership because a stakeholder is not a short-term hire. And so we've been doing this for quite a while, and the best example of this is probably the Jawbone brand. I would have used with this crowd, instead of using the headsets, I would have used a Jambox. How many of you has a Jambox in this room? Nice. Well, it's about the same amount, but we only launched it about 6 months ago. The Jambox has become a world phenomenon, and the idea is pretty simple: to get rid of your wires when you're listening to music. You know, the theory is that docks are dead because you're doing something on your phone. Why would you stick your phone into anything and leave it there? How do you interact with something that's static? In this case, we moved from being a Bluetooth headset company, where we're continuing in that business, but now building a wireless audio business on top of that. And what it means when you launch something and you want to popularize it in this way is that, you know, we, without a lot of advertising budget, is we do a lot of outreach. We go to exhibits. This is an exhibit in Milan, the Milan Furniture Fair, which, for anybody interested in seeing how new businesses launch themselves, is actually a place I would recommend to go. And we launched it in this gallery, and as we basically created walls of Jamboxes. This is a little speaker here. And as you can see, there's no wires going to each of these structures. No wires for the audio input, and no wires for the power. And the sound that would come out of these structures that had hundreds of speakers in them was absolutely incredible. But also, sort of the beauty and the concept attracted large crowds. This is what happened when you create the kind of pull that we did through designing the launch and the experience of the product. And we're about to actually diversify into yet another space with Jawbone, which is Up. It's a bracelet that will help you manage your sleep and manage your exercise as well as your food intake. A very pertinent project for the days that we live in, and one that has a huge amount of interest both with the consumer but also with insurance companies, the CDC, anybody who is interested in the health of the citizens of this country. And it includes, obviously, an application that gives you a lot of that kind of information. It's really about the quantified self, and I'm sure you guys are very familiar with what the quantified self is, but huge amount of interest in consumers to have that. So these kind of projects evolve over the years. What happens essentially is that as a designer, you get faster and better the longer you work on a problem. So having those partnerships in place allows us to make the work, to build a brand over time, and to create what I believe is a lot of value there. This is just a quick visual that we took of just some work in packaging, and some work in VIP, and some work in app design, and some work online, and some work in branding and logos. But this work accumulates over the year, and the fact that we're able to sort of build it with a company, continue to build it with a company, is really due to the kind of partnership that we have. And it made me think about, okay, so this is the typical process when you go from strategy to brand design and app and software and ID and marketing and advertising, and you can probably add a few to this. And the problem with going out and hiring a company for each of these is, honestly, they're all going to want to do something different than the last, right? They're all going to try to propose something that kind of takes you to a different place. And the idea for me is to not think of it in a linear fashion, in a point A to point B to point C fashion, and rather to think of it as a 360-degree process, where you constantly, everything that you do is constantly feeding back into the product and the marketing and the idea and the brand. And if you think of it, that's the way all the companies that we know to have a tremendous value, like Apple or Herman Miller, are really working on a sort of an ongoing basis. So here we get to something you two are familiar with. And so I think it was in a room like this, but not, it's a room like this, but not this room when we met. And you presented, Jason and Jeff here presented with models, which was kind of fun. Presented this idea for a company that would break the mold when it comes to sort of underwear, the underwear business. And I had always wanted to do an underwear type of business. I had actually had an attempt a few years prior, because I felt that since really the 80s, since Calvin Klein, really nothing's been done that's new in the space. Big logos and a big, on those elastic bands, but there was really no other type of relationship outside of the logo and the advertising campaign that had been created in the space. So I felt there was tremendous potential, and I, thought these guys were the right guys to go into such an adventure. And what's been interesting is, for me, is it is very much, a startup is very much a testing ground for new theories and new ideas. One of them being that people want to buy the same fit and the same comfortable underwear and the same sustainability credentials, but they want something different all the time. And how we justify doing that is by creating new designs with nonprofits, which I think was a genius concept these guys presented when we first met. And as we all discovered, the devil is in the details, or God is in the details, depending on who you ask, which means that it took about a year and a half, I think, to finalize the right concept, to source the right packaging materials that are biodegradable, to find the right factory with that would sort of start with a small business. And all of these assets, all of these intentions, all of these theories, all of these ideas become actually the IP, what differentiates this brand from another. So it's been a fascinating journey, and there's so many different organizations that that PACT has partnered with. One of the latest one and most fun ones is with the Sierra Club. This is an anti-coal campaign the Sierra Club and some of their younger members have been putting together, and we gladly contributed to it and created the incentive for them to pull their pants down in protest, protesting the use of coal-fired plants, power plants on campus, which we were all surprised that hundreds of campuses used that. And it's interesting too, because we probably got the most amount of support and visibility in this project. We also got the most amount of bewildered hate coming from other parts of the constituency on coal. But it's doing well, right? Yeah. And here too, building all the assets, all the language is something that you do one-on-one, with in partnership with those people you decide to go on these journeys with. The countless amounts of detail and reinventing of how things are done have to be also balanced with market market realities, and that's really where a lot of the creativity comes. And it's really only possible to think of these issues, these problems, over that long of a period of time if you have this kind of relationship and this kind of partnership in place. We started with a packaging here that we shipped up here, the green one that's compostable, that we mailed to people after they ordered online, to recyclable packaging that shows the product right from the outside. So you don't have to open a box. I mean, you've been at those department stores, all the boxes are like open because people don't trust the labels, and they shouldn't, that are on the outside. So reinventing every little bit of the process and moving from underwear to t-shirts and other things such as socks very soon. So we have at fuseproject, we have about 15 of these that are now in place. And 15 different types of partnerships, from the Mint robot cleaner up there to Herman Miller, with whom we partners on every single product, to new electric technology for bikes and cars, to Peel, a different way to surf your TV to get rid of the universal remote, to vibrators. We have a diverse portfolio, as you can see. But I think,
you got to talk about that
well,
one.
this is, I mean, every single one of them is a way to really challenge a status quo. And vibrators are one of these categories that were ripe for reinvention when Jimmy Jane and Ethan Imboden, the founder of Jimmy Jane, started it. It's a product that is made of terrible materials that are not healthy. It's a product that has no warranties attached to it. It's a product that 50% of women own. So I would say that's a business opportunity right there. But most importantly, it's a product that doesn't deliver either on the promise or the experience or the quality or the health aspect. And it's one that if you design it like you design anything else, as you would design an iPhone, with respect for your customer, there is a sort of a no-brainer as far as product categories. So yes, I believe, at first we thought underwear was risque, but sorry guys, we went even more risque. And they happen to be, the vibrators happen to be successful and get us a lot of good feedback. So, what else can you ask for? So, the next chapter, and we can, I definitely want to leave some space for questions, so I'm going to go through quickly through the next chapter here. But the next chapter is about doing better. So I think we all know now that design is a key element of business, and that the ROI on design has really been widely demonstrated by Apple. Right? If you look at Apple, if you look at the valuation of Apple, just give me a number of a percentage of that valuation based on the work that's been done at Apple on design. Just think about that number. And hence, the ROI is pretty clear. But I think design can do a lot more. And for me, design is a way to give to Mexican children a pair of free eyeglasses, which allows them to see better, to learn better. That's the name of the nonprofit. Design is a way to make those same kids be a part of the process of design. Pick their own colors, pick their own shapes, mix them together. And hence, also, design is a way to create the manufacturing system and the way that such a system would actually work, with actually almost every pair customized by the kids themselves, with even their name engraved on the inside of the sides there, and with those robust very robust glasses made out of a Swiss material called Grilamid. You can almost sort of flip them upside down. These kids get over the stigma so prevalent in Mexico and so many other places that wearing glasses is a handicap. You know, they were when at some of the distributions we were at, they were running around saying, "I am unique. I am unique," and this is in collaboration with the Mexican government, which has realized that in some of their classes, 50% of their kids needed glasses, and that without those glasses, they're simply not learning. So it seems to me, and it would seem to anyone, I think, that that is the right investment to make in your future working population, especially if you can make that investment at a cost for the lenses and the custom frames, custom lenses, custom frames, and a box of $7 a pair. To me, design is also a way to solve societal stigmas and possibly lives. You know, how do you get people to talk about condoms as AIDS and pregnancy prevention? With a new brand, beautiful dispensers, which are placed in all kinds of different venues in New York, from dance clubs to a bodega on 105th Street. This is the entrance. I mean, the entrance and the exit. It's not the back of the store. We've seen these installed in high-end hotels and restaurants. Well, since these condom dispensers and this new brand has been designed 4 years ago, they went from a 9 million condoms distribution a year to 39 million condoms distributed for free in New York, essentially based on the acceptance of the concept, the fact that we started a conversation with those. So our practice of design, which I call design for humanity or design for good, was started with the chairman of the MIT Media Lab, Nicholas Negroponte. And it was started with this project, the $100 laptop. Everybody familiar with it? Yeah? So I'll give you the quick update. 3 million children have a laptop. They're in 40 different countries, from Mongolia to Uruguay. In Uruguay, every single child between the age of 6 and 18 years old owns one, distributed again for free by the government. Design is also about creating the iconography that people will forever recognize about the meaning and the strength of a project. In this case, a stamp in Uruguay has been made around the project. In neighboring Peru, 900,000 kids own a one laptop per child. And for me, design is universal. This is Switzerland. This is my nephew. And this is how he begged me to send him one. And very, very soon, in fact, I had one of them in my hands today. We're going to present the $100 laptop or the $100 tablet or less. And this is a project we've been working on for about 3 years, launching the tablet version of the laptop. So finally, something about entrepreneurship, something about observing the world around you, looking for what you want, and it may happen to be what everyone else wants as well. I'm really a firm believer that what's out there right now is not what people want, and that it has to be yet discovered. So I think we all constantly search in ourselves, in how we live, in our neighborhoods. We look at how we interact with things. We look at how things frustrate us. You know, whether it's a service or a product, everything is going to be redesigned in the next 15 to 20 years. If you just think about sustainability, every process, in order to sort of meet the expectations of the consumer, in order to be of the right cost and of the right quality and of the right sustainability, every single process is going to be redesigned. When you redesign every factory, every process, you have to rethink the way, what it does, how it does it. And I think we as designers and entrepreneurs are really entering a golden age of design. Sustainability is one of the big impetus, but it's certainly not the only ones. Relevance and connection and technology are others. So I'll give you one example. We had been thinking in the office that it used to be really fun and cool to like ride a bicycle around, but then we all got older and we all got kids around and whatnot, and you can't ride a bike with a kid. I mean, legally you can't. And so we developed this bike, which is a neighborhood bike, and it allows you to do everything you want within your neighborhood. This is a concept. This is just for fun. I mean, we're not even being paid for this. This is just because we want to, because we can, because we have the tools, because people in the office get jazzed about coming up with their own solutions. But it's a bike with a cargo in front, very much like a pickup truck. It has locks and lights integrated in it. You can put things in there, lots of different things. You can pick up groceries. I'm not going to fall off because it's a tricycle, really. And so, for me, these kind of concepts are the kind of things that young entrepreneurs, designers can come up can create, and this is a responsibility we have. That's where the future is going to be, in little things like that are silly, and in little things like that are going to be big successes. So whether we're reducing materials and energy for sustainability reasons, whether we're creating the logistics that make the distribution of 350,000 glasses for kids every year. What good design is for me is what it does best is accelerate the adoption of new ideas. And what the world wants is to experience these new ideas for themselves. One thing I said recently, and I did say that at the Clinton Global Initiative, is that American design today is better received than our foreign policy. And probably than our economic policy too. Because people crave and admire what YouTube or the iPhone can do for them, whether it's in Palestine or Brazil. If our entrepreneurs and our designers, as good partners, continue to understand that and do it well, designers, I believe, will cement the notion that we are the best ambassadors of American culture. That's it. Thank you.
I think a few of you are taking off to another class. Is that right? The weekend and evening program. Students have a class. If you need to get up and leave, that's okay. You can do it now. The rest of you, it's question time here for Yves. So we've got microphones, and let's start off with some questions.
Thanks for coming. You talked about the value of humanitarian design. And I was wondering if you could talk more about, given just the sort of size and scope and scale of all the social problems the world faces, it seems like there's sort of a mismatch between the sort of supply of good design, whether it's firms or designers, that can be steered at that problem. And I was curious if you had thoughts on what it would take for the industry to really deliver on that potential more in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is true. Everything you said is true. I do think it's changing a little bit. I had never, we had done some pro bono work in the past, but we had never done the kind of long-lasting kind of partnerships that we're doing now. And I think there's a few groups, there's a few organizations that now realize that what design delivers, the efficiency, the efficacy that design can deliver, and that these are just as needed in a non-profit space as there are in a for-profit space, right? I mean, a non-profit has to deliver on their, great service, has to make their customer, their constituency happy. I mean, those are the exact same things you would expect from both. And I'm seeing a change. I mean, we see a lot more people on the nonprofit side coming to see us. I think the challenge is often budget or money. I think we need to, as designers, I believe in sort of putting a part of our time and certainly a large part of our output in the space. But there are some mechanisms that are in place. We have a 501c3, a nonprofit organization attached to our business, I think it's changing. Definitely, the need is being felt. I would add one more thing, which is sometimes when you have to solve a problem like this, which isn't about initially, it's not about delivering fancy, expensive eyeglasses to the fashion street, in your city. When you solve a problem like this, there's actually a lot of business opportunity that comes out of it as well, because the space that you're solving is so extreme that the solutions that you come up with, I think have a lot of validity. In, for example, a for-profit version of this business, which would deliver part of their output to the other 90%, and the other part would be a money-making a for-profit business. So I think there's a lot of IP, there's a lot of things that we discovered along the way in the $100 laptop, in the New York City condom, in this project, and a few others that are actually really applicable to entrepreneurial model as well. And it's certainly a combination of these often that happens to be the more sustainable humanitarian type of organization.
More questions?
What's your thought process while designing a product in a very rapidly changing industry? For instance, one of your noted designs is GE's Watt Station. And how do you go about designing something, keeping in mind that this product has to be relevant in coming years?
That's the really fun, exciting part of the work that we do. Is we are constantly trained, and I would say the best entrepreneurs out there, the best thinkers in business out there are constantly trained as well to think around the corner, to think 3, 4, 5 years down the line. And so we're constantly putting ourselves in a scenario of an evolutionary part of our existence. The way I live now is going to be different from the way I live in 3 years. The ideas that are percolating, the things that are tugging at my emotions, the things that I'm starting to think, there's something a bit weird and wrong about this, are things that I need to sort of tap into as a designer or as an entrepreneur to find what the next need is, or the next solution is. And the GE Watt Station is something we had started probably 2.5 years ago, and I was just told it's at Lowe's. You can sort of buy it at Lowe's all over California, and they're actually selling out, which is something that we anticipated 3-4 years ago, and something that hopefully is going to keep sort of building over the coming years. But that's part of the creative mental exercise that I think happens when you're constantly being provoked, when you're constantly asked to sort of tap into your own experience or hear other people's experiences and turn that into relevance, that is just around the corner. And by the way, that's really why this job is really fun. I mean, it's the people that you work with in my space, again, whether they're on the business side or the design side, are very, very lucky to be always really stimulated in this way.
Hello. I'm really interested in how you talked about using partnerships with businesses, and in particular with startups. So
Yeah.
the thing with a startup is hopefully it'll last, but you're not really sure.
Yeah.
So how did the gents from PACT impress upon you that it was worth an investment of your time, and how could other startups team up with design firms to
Right.
create a partnership rather than just a one-off?
So first of all, you have to function just like any kind of angel investor or any kind of VC firm. You need to create a diverse portfolio. You need to make sure that what it is that you're going to bring is going to create a lot of value, and that value, and that the rewards, the value that you're creating and the rewards are commensurate, right? I mean, nobody wants to hire you again in that kind of scenario unless you've done something significant, right? And nobody wants you to receive large amounts of royalty or equity on a project like this unless you have created a large amount of value, right? So it's really about dialing every partnership differently. It's really about figuring out the stage of the business and the potential of the business and where it is that you're going to insert yourself and kind of help build the business in the most efficient way throughout at every single stage of it. That said, so you look at that. You look at the economic potential. You look at how you're going to be able to make a real difference as a designer. But you also have to obviously look at who is across the table. Are they going to be able to deliver? For me, one of the funny criteria is that I don't really like to work with specialists. I don't like to work with experts because they don't tend to take the risks. They tend to come in with all the answers. Again, going back to the best briefs are the ones with questions in them, not answers in them, right? And when these two guys came, they were no expert. They knew certain areas. They knew the nonprofit space. They knew, but they didn't come in with an already sort of made up picture of what the underwear could be. But they came with a lot of credentials, on the business side, on the nonprofit side, a lot of passion. The other problem with people who know too much or who have, I really need to feel like there is no exit. The people who come to you, the entrepreneurs, the startup, the technologists that come to you, it really needs to feel like the only exit is kind of making this happen, right? There's no other choice than to succeed, and so there's a number of different criteria. One of which is how many times are you going to be able to have lunch with these people? You need to like them. You need to be able to get along. You need to be able to have fun times and conversations, but you need to also be able to have the tough conversations. One of the best criteria I've heard is somebody tell me is essentially pick your partners based on whether you want to have lunch with them a few times.
Maybe one or two more questions, maybe from a DISC member. Anybody? Yes.
Maybe with this project in particular, can you talk about the role that market research plays and how you kind of develop what these kids would want?
All right. The role of market research is zero. The role of listening and observation and qualitative, research is certainly there, and it was important for me to understand. There was a lot of research that the Mexican government had done, a lot of statistics, a lot of case studies on what had worked and what didn't work in distribution of eyeglasses. To give you an example, some American nonprofit showed up in Mexico and started distributing roundish eyeglasses that were inspired by a movie because they thought everybody wanted to be like in the movie, and that didn't work, right? So there's certainly like a lot of qualitative information that you take in into a project. But very similarly to Apple, for example, and some of the venture projects we do, we never test. We don't even show the stuff to our customers. We just tell them it's coming.
Okay, actually, two more questions. We'll finish up. The gentleman in the back and this gentleman in the green here.
Thank you. When you mentioned the example of the chair,
Yes.
you said that you had to reinvent many things from scratch. Did you feel at some point that you were maybe reinventing the wheel? And if so, you have any recommendations on how to avoid that?
I don't think reinventing the wheel is a bad thing per se, to be honest with you. Herman Miller had reinvented the wheel already when they went from chairs that were padded and foam, right, to chairs that had mesh in them. I mean, that was reinventing the wheel. It was really hard. It took them 10 years from start to finish to launch the Aeron chair, right? But because of that, because they challenged the status quo, it became the best. Because of that, and because of the excellence of the product, it changed the world of chairs. In our case, we didn't have the luxury of 10 years. So what we had to do was to start where the Aeron chair was, and actually do something which I think is quite significant on the material level, which is now that the material in the back of the chair isn't a mesh, isn't a hard plastic. It's actually an elastomer that's put on tension on top of the frame. And that actually allows us a lot more intelligence in the way that the ergonomics are built into each area of the chair. So the way it feels in the center or in the lumbar area is completely different from the sides. And that is actually a lot like reinventing the wheel. In fact, if you ask Herman Miller, the back of the chair, that part that was injected in the big room I was showing, is the hardest part they've ever built in their entire history of the company. But it's worth it, because then you own the technology, you own the IP, and you're a few years ahead of your competition, and you deliver something that nobody else has. So there's nothing wrong with reinventing the wheel. That said, we couldn't change the wheels on the chair. So that is something that you can't change, and it's like really insane, because you have to sort of match so many regulations with a chair. It's a product that is one of the most legally sort of constrained and defined, and differently everywhere. Germany has very severe, but actually the most severe regulations around sitting, ergonomics, work in the office is Australia, believe it or not. So the fact is you have to reinvent the wheel within sort of a legal work frame, which is extremely constraining. So I actually think it's harder than reinventing the wheel. Because when they invented the wheel, there was no regulation.
Very last question, this guy in the green here.
Thanks a lot for taking the time to speak with us.
My pleasure.
So I think it's great that you guys have greatly reduced the sort of the energy required on shoes and the process for manufacturing chairs. But I see a bit of a tension between sort of great design and the amount of how much people want to purchase all these different products. So,
These what?
So for me, there's a tension between this great design and sort of how consumers, how much they want to purchase these products, and then fundamentally the issue of sustainability. So I guess my question is, what sort of role do you see design playing in actually reducing what end consumers purchase?
Sure. So this is a question I'm passionate about. It's good to end with it. A friend of mine was asked the question, why do you need more products? Why do we need more stuff? And his answer was, why do we need more books? Why write another book? And to me, it's actually absolutely true. The products, that chair is needed like a new book is needed, because it's about relevance. It's about what are the stages. It's not about achieving 100% green overnight. We will never be able to do that. Yet, if you work towards every iteration of your products and your processes to go towards a more sustainable, future, we will eventually get there. But we actually need to take these steps to get there. And putting products out there that are either long-lasting, the chair is warranted for 12 years, the vibrators are warranted for 3. First-time vibrators were ever got a warranty. If you create more long-lasting quality experiences, that's what people will seek. You will always try to innovate on top of something that is the best in its category. And so, to me, there is no doubt that there's stages in this evolution, and that rather than building crappy chairs that are toxic and that are done within within the worst of manufacturing conditions and that really create the worst outcome for all, if you're building under these new criterias, we do end up with a world that's much better off than not. So I don't believe in the business model of an IKEA, for example, which is sort of focused on furniture build really that's supposed to last 2 or 3 years. And if you go buy a chair at Staples, that's in the $100, $200 range, I can promise you it won't be around 2 to 3 years from now. So I do believe that there is actually the right place for products to go that are attainable on the one hand, and yet that can also achieve a much lower carbon footprint and a much longer existence. So somewhere between the greenies that say don't buy anything at all, and the low cost manufacturers that are putting as much crap as possible in the world, I believe the designers and the entrepreneurs have a responsibility to show us the future when it comes to building the right kind of products for everyone.
Thank you very much, Yves. Everybody.
Thank you very much. That's very